to clauses 1 and 2. And before I take a call, I'd just like to point out to members that no doubt those in the chamber and those listening at home will be able to recite in this very wide-ranging debate around clauses 1 and 2 virtually every point that has been made so far in the course of the debate. It's also important to note that repetition is a trigger for the chair calling the end to a person's call. So I encourage people to be interesting and creative in their debates. And so the question now is, members, that clause 1 stand part. I call Dennis O'Rourke.
Mr Chairman, thank you again. Clause 1 is indeed the clause I wish to speak about, because this title really isn't appropriate. And this hasn't been referred to so far in the debate. And it's not appropriate because it does not actually state what the Act is really about. It is not fundamentally about referendums, and that's what the title says. It's actually about replacing New Zealand's historic and well-respected national flag. But the title doesn't refer to that at all. The current name reflects only the means, which are the referendums, and not the ends, which is the replacement or not of the current flag for an alternative. And it's about the legislation which actually puts that into effect, because the most important part of the bill actually is the part which replaces the current flag with a new one, should that be the result of the two referendums. And this is not reflected at all in the name. And so I'm very disappointed in the name for that reason, and it really should be changed. It's actually some names, such as, for example, New Zealand flag replacement with a gormless, meaningless Modern Symbol Act, would actually be a lot more relevant to this particular legislation than the name which has been given for the reason that I gave. And Mr Chairman, I've seen the long list of flags already published, and I don't think that my term gormless, meaningless modern symbol is entirely out of place. When you look at those possible alternative flags, that name would be totally appropriate and much better than the name that this has been given. That list was a patchwork of gaudy and ugly designs, and that needs to be referred to and reflected in the name of this bill. None of them even slightly represent New Zealand's heritage in any way like the current flag does. Another point, the member opposite says how ridiculous, but it's absolutely true. The current flag, this flag here, actually does represent New Zealand's heritage, and none of the rubbish, absolute rubbish that I saw in that gaudy list could possibly compare with it on those grounds. And furthermore, Mr Chairman, the title is not truly representative either of the actual referendum process. And the name would be better, something like New Zealand flag gerrymandered back to front referendum bill, because that actually is what this bill is. It is not just the New Zealand flag referendum bill. It is a gerrymandered back to front referendum bill, and therefore the name should say so. And it's gerrymandered because of the fundamental flaw in the first referendum, which is that people wanting none of the alternatives have no way to vote in the first referendum, because the New Zealand flag is not there. So that they can only participate by casting a vote with none of the options chosen, just leaving it blank and putting it back into the ballot box. Or perhaps to write across it, I want the current New Zealand flag. That would do it. Because, Mr Chairman, they are now currently disenfranchised from participating in the first flag referendum. If those people want none of the alternatives, how can they participate? They can't. The only two ways that I know of that they could participate are by drawing a vote and then putting it back with nothing written on it, or by writing "I want the current New Zealand flag" on it. There is no provision in the first referendum allowing them to express their feelings, and that's wrong, and that is why I say that it is gerrymandered, and that should be referred to and reflected in the title. And Mr. Speaker, New Zealand First does call on people to do one of those two things because they have been disenfranchised, and New Zealand First says to those people who want the current flag, go along and vote, but don't choose any of the alternatives if you want the current flag, or write across it, "I want the current New Zealand flag." I think that's a perfectly valid thing for them to do, and New Zealand First says that they should feel free to do so.
Mr. Chair.
I call the Honourable David Parker.